Computer. Okay. So, hello everybody. We're starting our final Debord Films series. And today we're going to see his last film. It was a 1 hour video that was made shortly before his death. So I'm not going to introduce Debord or his other films because I think anyone watching this already knows about that. But this last film, you may remember when we watched 2 weeks ago, we watched what was he called his last film, In Jeremy Musnote, which was this autobiographical film he made in 1978. And when he made that and finished that, he even published the book called Complete Cinematic Works in French. And it was, here's the 6 films. I'm not going to make another film. And then, as we know, his producer, uh, uh, Gerard Libovici, was assassinated. And without going into detail about that, Debord decided to withdraw his films from publication. And so, big blank spot there. They weren't available and from circulation. They weren't available. And so that was in around 1985. But in the early 90s, a woman named Brigitte Cornand, a relatively young filmmaker or video maker, made a video, a half-hour video that was shown on this French cable channel. It was called Cette situation doit changer. This situation should change. And this video, I haven't seen it, but it was using a lot of détournement. And it was about Debord and the Situationists. And, using kind of things that Debord had used in his films and so on. And she sent a copy of this to Debord, addressed respectfully to the greatest determiner of them all. And he looked at it, whenever he got to where he had some means of looking at it, and thought it was pretty good. So he wrote her and arranged to meet her. And at some point she came where Debord and Alice were living in central France and visited them and, got to know them, had an affair with Debord. And at some point there, after they got to know each other, he suggested, how would you like to do a video with me? I mean, I don't know the details, but of course she jumped at the chance. And you can see in the book of film scripts, he arranged with her that he and she would do a video together. Basically, he would write it. He would say everything about it. She would just be sort of implementing his things. But she would be directing it in the sense that she'd help dig up various film clips. And in some cases, she might suggest, oh, we can't get that. How about this? And so on. So they were collaborating somewhat. And she would deal with all the contract with the cable station, and he was paid money. It was like a deal. If you give me $50,000, I'm going to give you the right to have this program one time. And that cable station was quite happy to do that, again, as any station would have been. And so then, as this was happening, he had this illness that had been bothering him for 2 or 3 years, but that got progressively worse. And so when this was in like November 1994. And so just as she was nearing completion of the video, and he had already given her the things he wanted in it and so on, he decided to commit suicide because this illness was very painful, and there was nothing, it was incurable. So as he knew that that was coming on, he sent her a last message to say, proceed with this, and just explaining what was going on. And then killed himself November 30th that year. And about a little more than a month later, in January 1995, she had completed the video and it was shown on that station. So that's the video we're going to see now. And I'm just going to briefly go through what's in the video so you'll be oriented a little bit. And then we're just going to watch the video. It's a 60-minute thing. So unlike the other films, there's no voice-off narration. Instead of that, there's just silent film titles that come out in all caps periodically that sort of serve the same function. It's like Debord talking, or like the omniscient narrator making a statement. And that's alternated. They're not happening at the same time, with various news clips and photos, mostly news clips and stuff like that. And meanwhile, there's intermittent music, accordion music by this guy, Lino Leonardi. We'll talk about him later on, but he was somebody who Debord admired for his music. And so the film starts out with this French talk, I don't know what, not a talk show, but you know, where you have a bunch of talking heads sitting around a table discussing something. And in this case, in 1978, they're discussing Debord's book that has just come out on that date, Comments on the Society of the Spectacle. And there's one guy in particular that's just going off, you know, they can't shut him up about how he hates Debord and how this is weird and outrageous and everything. And mixed in with that is a little, then the accordion comes in and you see these quotes to the effect like, I'm never going to work, I don't care, you know. And this is a quote from a French song by Aristide Bruant. And then it turns back to that same discussion. And then you see this film is called Guy Debord, His Art and His Time. And so his art part is very brief, just a few minutes, but he's giving examples of, you know, it says Guy Debord did very little art, but the art that he did to the extreme. And the few examples are the blank screen film, like the first film, the white screen and dark screen, the graffiti that Debord wrote in 1952, Never Work, a page or two from Debord's memoirs, which is this kind of collage work that he did in 1958, I believe it was. And then the first manuscript page of Society of the Spectacle, and then two painted slogans. I think it's like realization of philosophy and that kind of thing. And then some pictures of his ill-famed companions, like his wife or Oscar Yorn and some of the other Situationist people and so on. And then the rest of the film is his time, his era, which is what we're in now. He's doing this back in 1994, remember, but it hasn't changed that much. It's just sort of followed through. And successively, we see a whole lot of stuff with just occasional comments coming in. They're usually news clips about stupid, moronic, ugly, vicious irrational things that are happening in our world. Just here we are, folks. And they include one of the bridges in Paris, first of all, being recreated for a film, and then being covered by the artist Christo, same bridge. And then a picture of the Aral Sea being dried up by climate change, forest fires, a trapped Colombian girl. She's trapped in a mudslide or something that, where she can't get out, and she's dying, and nobody can do anything about it, but she's alive, and they're interviewing her, and so Debord talks about how obscene that is. Then women wrestlers in Japan, then prospecting for oil near Paris, example of a complete idiocy, demolition of housing projects, a forest withered by acid rain, stormtroopers in 1933, the assassination of JFK, the Tiananmen Square tanks incident, tanks in Moscow, state terror in Haiti, and then in Algiers, a Somali woman about to be lynched, probably for some Sharia law infraction, French high schools being vandalized, and students being interviewed who are like totally clueless. Paris under the Nazi occupation, segue to modern Paris, a USA nuclear fallout alert, Chernobyl, the nuclear catastrophe, the opening of a 24/7 news channel, an interview with the French bureaucrat trying to excuse her negligence that caused a lot of people to die. She's a health person. Arthur Curvan, the proto-Dadaist, boxing, and that's contrasted with neo-Dadaism that Debord is saying this is just bullshit. And examples are two stupid modern art things. One is these columns built in the middle of Paris that are ugly and meaningless, and then a nuclear station surrounded by plastic sheep. And then Italian Premier Berlusconi annoyed because his vacation was interrupted because he had to deal with something. The funeral of a mediocre French politician who you've never heard of, lines in front of Paris art museums, Chinese protesters at Tiananmen, interview with Bernard Tapie, who is a sleazy kind of corrupt guy who's complaining about how everybody's complaining about his corruption all the time. Yashar Arafat giving a speech talking about his new, after a peace thing, his brothers in the Israeli government, a news discussion program, ACT UP demonstrations. And this, by the way, is one of the few things. In some of these others, you have people protesting, like in Algeria or something. But in this case, the ACT UP demonstrations, he doesn't say anything, but it's obvious that this is a good thing. Here's some people protesting about the fact that the government's not doing shit about this pandemic that's going on at that time. And then some very stupid but sort of obscure television clips from some sort of programs, floods, an ad for the French Regional Department of Penitentiary Services, i.e., the people who hire out prisoners, basically slave labor, corpses in Rwanda, and then we segue into pictures of Debord's companions, again, going back, who were mentioned earlier. So we're now kind of coming to the end of this, and he's winding it up. And then just as a little coda, we get Mitterrand, the French socialist premier, an outdoor concert, and then a G7 summit. and we see Bill Clinton and his entourage out jogging. So that's it. So now we're going to see the video, and Kim, let me know if anything is not working here.
Je crois en fait que ce livre est très étrange, parce que ce livre, en fait, il en dit long sur une pathologie. Parce qu'il nous parle.
That has to be a Zoom thing, because if you just go to that place online, you hear the music, and the music is great, by the way, and it kind of fills in. It's sort of strange to see that without it. So that's disappointing. But anyway, I don't think no, it's not a copyright issue. So anyway, um, we've got about a half hour here for a Q&A. So if you have some questions, please raise your digital hand. Bill Dawson.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It struck me that this film, because I think because it led off with the segment from the book review program, in which the one individual was bitterly criticizing comments on the Society of the Spectacle. I received the rest of the film. Maybe this was not Debord or his co-creators' intent, but I received it as a kind of his defense of his life, um, in a way, and what he had to say, given the fact that he was very near the end of his life, and maybe a summation of some of the main points he had tried to make. Whether that's true or not, I wonder if the panel here, all of us, all of you, would care to share your ideas on what relevance he has today, as represented by this film and other films. I was thinking here of a point that Ken made in the 2003 introduction to this book. It says, to quote Ken, "It should go without saying that passively venerating Debord is contrary to everything he stood for. The point is to assimilate what he has to say, use what seems pertinent, and ignore what does not." And I think the basic concept of the spectacle is highly pertinent today, and wondered how you all feel about that.
Well, it's does anybody have a specific answer to that? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next hands. I think, Bill, that we will see in the discussion, people will, yeah, for sure, Debord is very relevant, and we can criticize Debord if we feel that there's some problems there. But and yes, this is clearly just like in Jiram, you might say, he was also talking about himself and sort of assessing and defending. You know, the role he has played and the things he tried to do. Judy, unmute yourself. You can just hold down your space bar. You're still muted.
Am I okay? Can you
There
hear
you
me?
are.
Okay. Yeah, there was it was kind of has to do with the previous comment too. That Brigitte letter he wrote, he said, I don't want to hear and I don't want you to pay any attention to any comments whatsoever from anyone else, even laudatory ones. It is, in fact, inconceivable that I would recognize anyone else as having the slightest competence or qualifications to judge any aspect of my work or my conduct. Why is he
No,
so?
he's talking about that because the film is not made yet. He's saying, how are we going to do this? And the contract is that it's totally him. He's going to write it. He's going to determine everything. And then, subject to that, she's going to use her judgment in finding these images and figuring out how to do the technical stuff and so on. But he's saying no one else has any input in this. No one else can say, oh, I advise you to do more of this or do less of that or something. He's saying, forget all that. No one has any input on that. He's not saying nobody can criticize the finished product. He's talking about the process of making this. Like, in other words, it's very different than the thing about like an author writes a book and then the publisher edits it and chooses a cover and solicits blurbs and all this kind of thing. He's saying zero of that. It's very clear. He's saying no one has any competence or, fuck, but that's not saying afterwards, of course, we can do whatever we want with it. We can say, oh, he's too, he's mistaken, he's too full of himself or whatever, something. So, Ed Stress. There you go.
Yeah. Well, first of all, those places where I know where the sound didn't come through. Are there other places where it was not supposed to be foggy, but it was? Because there's a lot of filmage where it looked like it was way out of focus.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I'm not sure about this. First of all, remember it's things usually taken from TV, so nothing's very high quality here.
oh,
But I think remember this is an image. This is something online that we're tapping into, and so it's a YouTube thing already. And if something goes on YouTube, sometimes YouTube will say, oh, that clip is copyrighted. So then you have so I'm guessing that in a two or three of those cases, like at the funeral and some of that TV show stuff, it's just sort of a big blur and you hear people talking. And I'm guessing that maybe the images were blocked,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
got I got
because I
nothing.
don't think that would have been true in the original film. So
I got through most of it last night and I didn't see any blurs on
yeah,
mine.
yeah.
But maybe I think maybe the blurs were in the latter half, which I didn't get.
That's right. So
Yeah.
some of them were
And
anyway, I
and then
apologize,
oh,
like uh,
no,
we will be seeing these live in about in early August for those of you in the Bay Area. And I think when we see it without Zoom interfering, we will at least hear the music and
seeing
some of the
them
images will be better.
seeing
So
them live, seeing them live where?
in San Francisco,
Oh, I don't know about that. But
well,
anyway,
you'll hear about it. Yeah.
okay. And then
Anyway,
I had
uh,
another comment. I had another comment on the actual stuff. I a lot of times I mean it seemed like it was not a polemic. It didn't seem like it was hammering home, except for the absurdity of the administrators. That did seem, but like I was perplexed as to how to take it, especially with the Algerian school. I assume Algerian school children that were,
no, those are Parisian children.
but they were Parisian children from Algiers, or it was a race thing that was a
Yeah,
problem.
it's the Paris suburbs where
Yes,
there's a lot of North Africans and blacks.
yes, exactly. That's
Yeah.
what I mean. And it seemed there that it, uh, um, when I saw last night, I had more compassion for the students, and when I saw it today, I had more compassion for the teachers. So
Well,
I didn't feel like he had a polemic like the teachers are bad or the students are bad.
no,
But
we're looking at something, and I think everyone will agree it's a huge, humongous mess.
yeah, yeah, okay.
And every one of these other things is the same thing. You can in different ways. It's stupid, or it's evil, or it's vulgar, or whatever.
But
Ed Matthews.
just a second. But for those things, I think they had a monism, a one way thing. These guys are stupid. Bill Clinton, or you know. But for the school thing, it seemed like it was more complex because there were
Sure.
two adversaries
Yeah,
and they were both
that's
caught
right.
in it.
That's right. You got to use your head and figure out what's going on.
Right.
Ed Matthews.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Bill's point. Absolutely agree with what he said, because films are always structured in a certain way, and that's a sort of round table, which was always a popular thing in the 70s and 80s in France. I think Debord's choice in presenting ideas visually about the way in which democracy is in a complete mess at this point in time, we're looking at Debord trying to say, look, you may think that democracy is just fine and it's growing and developing. There are so many problems that you need to consider on a number of different levels, that when we watch news programs, right, information, we get lots of what, right? It's the whatness of the world. Rarely do we get a how, and most important, a why. And so the two threads that I think about, the first part is the one toffee nosed, interviewer, or whatever, the guy in the round table just saying, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and Debord hasn't read any history books. The other moment too that I really think is important is the young girl that we see that's up to her neck in water, and that is a real tragedy. And immediately after, there's the information that we see. Oh, the media like to present the truth, and literally the rest of the film is, here's the truth, you tell me what's going on. Like these snippets of whether it's acid rain, or whether it's flooding, or whether it's a drying up lake, all we get is the what, right? Here's what's going on. And even if you have these round tables, as we see towards the tail end, they are so glib and so superficial and so sort of friendly to one another, that they're just as useless. And so we have this complicated mess we're trying to deal with, and from so many different positions that, yeah, you realize that so many things are connected to one another. But generally speaking, so many of the themes that he talks about in the early 90s are still with us, whether it's racism, whether it's climate change. All these things are still around, if not worse. And he's saying, look, this is mon temps, right? This is my time. It's not about me. It's about what I think is important. Because when you think about it, it's a film about Debord, and yet he's not in it. We don't hear him speak. But these are the things that preoccupy him, because shortly before the film was made, he had come out with a book, Sick Planet. And Sick Planet really reflects on some of the same themes about this dying planet. So these are very much on his mind. The idea of, the ACT UP group, people are really pushing back. But yes, the nightmare there is bureaucracy that is able to just sort of explain away the death of someone, because in France in the 80s, that blood transfusion scandal was a scandal. People finally went to jail. And so Debord was able to see that once again, right? It's the bureaucrats, and they can explain away all these problems. So I find the film very powerful. And at times, that sort of black humor, that dark humor of his, especially during the interview with there's the two gentlemen and the woman, and he keeps sort of interjecting with his the intertitles. Well, here we go. They're all nodding at each other. They are all agreeing. Nothing really gets discussed. Just glib statements. And of course, now we call them sound bites, but really the same thing is going on. And so it's not about Debord, it's about his world. But man, is it complicated. So the gentleman at the beginning, you're absolutely wrong. This democracy may be growing, but man, it's going through some growing pains of all kinds. So yeah, it's probably one of my favorite films of his.
Thank you. So I don't see any other hands at the moment. Please raise them. I'd like to, Kim, do you have any remarks or comments?
Well, just to follow up on what Edward and Bill were saying about the opening discussion amongst the men in their suits and ties. One of them makes the comment that countering Debord, democracy is growing. He sees it as spreading. And then all these images that follow, all these different scenes that follow, are the opposite of that. It's like Debord is saying, well, I can show you where that's not the case. The tanks in the streets in various cities. But I also wanted to ask, there's a statement that's made, and it says, I will attempt to be as anti-televisual in form as I have been in content. So I thought that was an interesting statement, and considered it while I was watching the film, because a lot of times it seemed to me like it was a situation of changing the channels, where the cuts go from one scene to another, to another, to another, different locations. It's like changing the channel on a television set. So I thought that was an interesting comment, and I'm not, I will attempt to be as anti-televisual in form as in content. So I'm not certain how to understand that statement. So if anybody else has some ideas about that, I'd like to hear them.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind. Stuart, do you have any comment or question?
Yeah, I do have a question. I haven't read as much Debord, except really I've seen a couple films about Debord, and I've seen these films of Debord and read some of his parts of Society of the Spectacle. But in this film, the text seems a lot more sort of bitterly sarcastic and almost I mean, I get the black humor, but it's just really, really like gotcha, and just really, what's going to happen next? And, I've got you on that, odor of cancer. By the way, cancer is covered by Social Security. It's kind of like so much more dark and ironic sounding. And do you think this is related to the end of his life, or am I just misreading it? Because he was pretty dark in the reaction to the critics of his first film.
Yeah, yeah.
But this seems a little more like gotcha-y, like.
Well, I think all of the above. I mean, I think he's coming at a time that which we're still in, which is has fewer redeeming features than the 60s or the various early times. So, I mean, like I said, the ACT UP and maybe a few of those people rioting in Algeria or something, there hardly anybody is even fighting back. And if they are, they're just getting crushed. Mostly, it's the more, so I think there is some of that, but also he's just doing a different thing. His other films are all more composed and intricately interrelated. I think this last thing is like a parting shot. He does have the sense that he himself is not going to be around very much longer. Mike Ballard.
On the question of democracy, I think what the bourgeois are talking about in the introduction and in other places is bourgeois democracy, which is actually the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, which basically sees the working class as objects. I have one question about Debord, and I don't know whether this is, I don't know, too sensitive or something, but what disease did he have? What terminal disease did he
It was
have?
called alcoholic neuritis. And as you might guess from the title, it's a disease that comes from drinking a lot. He drank a lot. And from the other word in the title, it's apparently, he said, there's a little part in one of the notes where he actually writes a note about it. At first, it was fairly minor, but after a couple years, it kind of suddenly got worse, and it's like it's a nerve thing. So if a nerve thing gets bad, it is bad news. You don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So when it was
Right. Yeah, I can
getting to that
understand.
point, he was saying, okay, I'm going to kill myself. So he and Alice wrap up his affairs, finishes
Right.
whatever needs to be done in this video and so on. And then he
Yeah.
shot himself.
Yeah.
So, which has nothing to do with people sometimes say, oh, he was disillusioned in his old age or something. That's total bullshit.
Right. I
If
can
you
understand
look
that.
at any of its final things, he's just as feisty as ever, like no
Right.
barred. But in that case, he also didn't just want to linger around as a basket case
Sure.
pain. So
Right. Yeah.
that accounts for that. I'd like to move to various people, like John Soul. Do you have any comment or question?
Thank you. Just following up on the point of the relevance of Guy Debord today, just one line here: immunological prevention is a thing of the past. And now that we have a Secretary of Health who is against vaccines, it's kind of like an Ebola is spreading, and it seems like goodbye immunology. So that's my only
But I
comment.
think his original sense, though, was that even if we had good immunology stuff in place, these things like COVID and so on will crop up, and you can't just prevent everything. In other words, it's sort of part of the whole ecology of the globe that some of these things are just appearing, because of antibiotics or using too much, or we eliminate the environment for various species, and so that ends up meaning that we get a new disease from some animal, whatever.
Yeah.
All these different factors.
Right.
think
I
was-
also just wanted to mention that having seen all the other films and read the books, this one was very powerful because it didn't have the voiceover, and it was just it's like the framing of it was already done by the other films, and so eliminating that voiceover uh, had more impact than kind of drumming it in again and again with more text.
uh-huh.
So I found this one to be very powerful and a kind of sweet souvenir. I should say bittersweet because it is very dark,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like his final souvenir. And I liked the collaboration. I thought she was excellent in choosing the images. Some of them are very stark, and the emotions that one goes through are very horrific at times. But there's always also a kind of modernist, wonderful way that she frames some buildings and things that I also found quite artistic. And finally, um, when he had done in his maybe earliest movie the blank white screen and then the blank black screen, that was like the kind of extreme avant-garde way of saying this is film as a kind of joke and as a kind of extreme. It's like here it is, black, white, nothing else. So after that, he had kind of nowhere to go, but he had a tremendous career, and I just loved watching every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirsty, do you have any comment or question?
Okay. All right. I was having trouble unmuting. Yeah, no, this is really interesting. And I mean, yeah, just the kind of going back and forth between these really vapid sort of TV hosts, pseudo-intellectual TV hosts chatting about this and that, starting out with chatting about Debord himself and which was kind of interesting to see that. But sort of that and then these shots, so that's just sort of, oh yeah, business as usual and so on. And then these shots of collapsing buildings and the floods, the acid rain, Chernobyl. It was just quite interesting of kind of just putting those things together. Yeah, and I agree. The lack of the voiceover made it kind of more intense. Like we don't like there's nothing more to be said almost.
Yeah, it's more sinister almost,
Yeah, yeah, and it was really interesting the way he sort of ties like daylight savings time in with like now Nazi time has taken over Europe and just as this well it's a petty thing, but it is kind of like, yeah, it's not like we think, oh, we defeated them and everything's great now. But yeah, and just as a little thing, it was really interesting to see actual video of Arthur Cravan in this film.
Oh yeah.
As a moment of, oh, here's somebody who really was interesting and creative,
Yeah.
unlike everything else that we're showing here of all these really
This big,
horrible
this
people.
big monster.
Yeah.
He
But
did-
the other thing that I found was really an interesting thing on the environmental side of things is like, oh, they're digging for oil in Versailles. Even, like is like, all your images of what, oh yeah, everything's fine, history is great and all that. Oh, but they're like ripping it up to prospect for oil. But yeah, anyway, no, I found it very interesting and yeah, rather like his last words, kind of
Yeah,
very
thank
moving.
you.
Yeah.
Gerhard, do you have any comment or question?
Yes, Ken, thank you. All along, I've been seeing these films and the written work as deriving, or we're deriving a lot of the tools of activism from this. I mean, ordinary people. I think that Debord would really find the internet interesting, or YouTube, because the whole world has gone towards this media enactment. We live through media more than we ever did before, whether or not we watch television. And I see this vestiges of this on the street. When you go to protests, these No Kings protests, people are making their own signs, coining a lot of their own slogans, or actually they appropriate them from other places. We've got a guy right now in the East Bay. His name is Boots Riley. He's made a film. It's talking about shoplifters as political forces. And he uses this over-the-top kind of stuff that Guy Debord first explored, or some of these people, by being very fanciful about his choice of idiomatic ways of conveying things through film or in presence, in the presence. So I see it's very instructive in terms of new tools. And I wish we'd spent more time looking at this. It's called The Sick World, I think, this other work that he did.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think I sent you a link to that, so you can read that. Ed Barcelone, do you have any comment or question?
I just posted one in the chat if you want to read it.
Okay, let's see. Related to the school thing, how can a dumbed-down generation born under a fully developed society of the spectacle and not having known a pre-spectacular world escape its influence? And that's a really good question. I think there's certain fundamental human things, like that anybody who's sort of able to function, as much as the language gets degraded and so on like that, there still is communication that happens. And even like, just to take an extreme example, those kids in the Paris suburbs who just look and sound like utter morons. I mean, like you wonder if they can even read at all and so on. Nevertheless, they've got some life to them. And hopefully, I mean, I don't know, one way or the other, if they want to survive, if they want to have some kind of life, they'll have to learn some of this stuff. And maybe it won't be like reading big books. Maybe it will just be a few slogans here and there or something. But I'm not answering this very well. I'm saying we are in a kind of new world, like with the internet and AI and all these sorts of things. But there's a certain fundamental thing that's still around, which is that we're people. And as the people who are controlling us are also people who are also ignorant and screwing up from their end. So it's kind of hard to know, just because we see, oh, they've captured all the TV stations or something like this. It doesn't mean that there isn't other communication and activity going on. It's just that it may not appear online or on TV or something. And I mean, it's, I and you more or less are in a relatively intelligent, I mean, we're people who read books and stuff like this. So it's kind of discouraging to see some kid who is almost oblivious to that whole world. So that is a big downside, like tying your hand behind your back in a fight. But nevertheless, other things are going on. We've had, reactions against this kind of thing where people in miserable circumstances sometimes come up with pretty inventive things. I mean, in Hungary in 1956, that was a pretty gloomy place. And they came up with this huge revolution, like under such horrible circumstances, police state kind of thing. Or we have people in Minneapolis, you know, there's these stormtroopers coming in by the hundreds and thousands, and they have no experience of this. But within a few months, they're figuring out how can we get around? How can we warn people about this? How can we do, you know, and I have no idea if I was there, would I deal with it inventively? I don't know, you know, but whatever they have to deal with, they are coming up with things. So I just have to, I mean, personally, I just go with what I can deal with. So I have this book group and I write articles and put them online and stuff. And I don't worry about somebody else who may not be online because hopefully it will filter around. But I think we just need to do what we can do wherever we are. I mean, long answer, but let's see here. Bill Graves, do you have any comment or question? Maybe you didn't hear me. Let's see here. While we're waiting, I thought I would go back to the film that we saw 2 weeks ago, the Injirum. And here is near the end of the film where Debord is talking in his own voice. And he's gone through his life and all this. And he gets sort of towards the end and he's saying, you know, after all these adventures, and he's saying, as for what we have done, how could the present outcome be assessed? He's talking in 1978, but I think we can look at it. The landscape we are now traversing has been devastated by a war this society is waging against itself, against its own potentialities. The uglification of everything was probably an inevitable price of the conflict. If we have begun to win, it is because the enemy has pushed its mistakes so far. The most fundamental issue in this war, for which so many fallacious explanations have been given, is that it is no longer a struggle between conservatism and change. It is a struggle over what kind of change it will be. We, more than anyone else, were the people of change in a changing time. He's talking about the Situationists, but also our generation and so on. The owners of society, in order to maintain their position, were obliged to strive for a change that was the opposite of ours. We wanted to rebuild everything, and so did they, but in diametrically opposed directions. What they have done is a sufficient negative demonstration of the nature of our own project. Look at what we've just seen tonight. Everything the opposite of that is what we're going for. What they have, their immense works have led them to nothing but this corruption. Their hatred of the dialectic has brought them to this cesspit. We have to destroy, and we had good weapons for doing this, any illusion of dialogue between these antagonistic perspectives. The facts would then speak for themselves. They have. It has become ungovernable, this wasteland where new sufferings are disguised with the name of former pleasures, and where people are so afraid. They turn in the night consumed by fire. They wake up in alarm and gropingly search for life. And word is getting around that those who have been expropriating that life have ended up losing it themselves. This civilization is on fire. The whole thing is capsizing and sinking. What splendid torpedoing. And then a little later on, it was already the dawn of this exhausting day that we are now seeing draw to a close, when the young Marx wrote to Ruge, that was 1843, "You can hardly claim that I think too highly of the present time. If I nevertheless do not despair of it, it is because its own desperate situation fills me with hope," unquote. That's Marx. So I think we'll end there. And I'm going to end the recording, and then we can take care of any little technical things at the end. So thank you for bearing with the poor video quality and all that. But I think you saw enough, and you can also read in the book that you know what's going on. So that thus will close our Zoom series on Debord's film. Those of you in the Bay Area, as I said, 3 months from now, will be seeing them in person in San Francisco. So thanks again for your attendance and questions. And I'm going to stop the recording.